In this video, we will show you how to replace your front wheel bearing hub assembly on this Ford Fusion. This will be located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Safely raise and support the front of the vehicle, we can start removing the wheel. To remove your wheel, you have 5 19mm lug nuts. We'll get those out of the way and we can remove this. Take hold of the wheel, remove it from the vehicle. Now that we have the wheel off, we can remove our 32mm axle nut from this area. With that removed, we'll continue with a hammer and punch directly in the center of the axle, separating this from the wheel bearing. Once you have movement from there, you can continue on. Once you have the axle broken free, we're going to continue on with removing the caliper. We don't need to remove the caliper from the bracket, essentially just the bracket from the knuckle. You're going to find that there's 2 18mm headed bolts that hold this in place. Go ahead and remove the pair. Just give that a quick inspection, start it back in a couple threads, continue on to the next mounting bolt. Take hold of the caliper, we're going to slide it out and away from the brake rotor and we'll hang it aside, putting no pressure on the flex hose. We do not want to cause any damage. A quick inspection of the brake pads, set it aside. Now we can remove our brake rotor. Looking along the back side of the knuckle, we have the area where the ABS wire is. It should be pressed right into place on the strut itself. Ours is actually broken, but typically you can pry it out of place. Now we're going to remove the 2 bolts that are holding the steering knuckle to the front strut. These bolts come through from the front towards the rear. For the front, we'll be using a 21mm, and as for those 2 nuts, we're going to be using a 24mm. Now typically you're going to have to use a hammer and lightly tap these out of place. You just want to be extremely careful for the threads of the bolts and of course your ABS wire. Do not damage your ABS wire. Quick inspection of the hardware as we continue here. Let's start that back through there temporarily. Continue on to the second mounting bolt. As we remove this, we're going to start pulling the knuckle down. You do want to make sure that the axle is getting pushed towards the center of the vehicle and not getting separated or damaged in any way. We'll just pop this out of its mounting bracket. It'll give us a little bit more slack on the ABS cable. Now we're going to focus along the back side of the knuckle. You're going to find 4 15mm bolts. These bolts go through the knuckle and then they actually screw into that wheel bearing. We'll remove all 4 of these and then we can remove the wheel bearing from the knuckle. I'm going to start this one back in a couple threads here. Get the last one. Continuing from here, we're going to remove the bearing from the knuckle. To do this, you can lightly tap on it with a hammer a few times. If it doesn't want to separate, you could also use the mounting bolts along the backside, start them in a couple threads, and then tap on those to push this out of place. Remove the bearing. There it is, friend. With the bearing out of place, the next thing we need to do is clean and inspect the knuckle where the brand new bearing will sit. We have the flat surface along here, but also inside the circular port. The bearing makes its way in there, so we need to be clean and free of any of this miscellaneous debris. You can use a wire brush or some sandpaper, whatever works best for you. I can feel a light amount of corrosion here. I'm going to take care of that. I'll just use a hammer and chisel if necessary. We'll give this a quick wipe and then apply a thin amount of copper anti-seize. When doing so, you want to be extremely careful not to get any on your ABS sensor. You can see it right in this port here. Use a glove finger to spread it around as necessary. Keep away from that ABS sensor. Before we install the brand new bearing, it's important to make sure you clean and inspect your mounting bolts for the bearing, and go ahead and apply some blue thread locker to those threads. When you install this, you want to make sure you have it in the proper orientation, aligning all the bolt holes. While we hold this in place, we'll carefully insert all of our mounting bolts, starting them in by hand. Do not tighten any of them until they're all started. Now we can snug these up and torque them to 98 foot-pounds. Now we're going to make sure we clean the mounting bolts that hold the knuckle to that front strut and apply blue thread locker to those. Continuing from here, we'll carefully start pressing the axle into the knuckle as we swing the knuckle up towards that strut. Start on the mounting bolts and snug them up. Now we'll snug them up, torque these to 173 foot-pounds. While we're in this area, you should try to reattach the ABS wire to the front strut. As I said before, ours is broken, but we do have the area on the bracket that we can secure it here. We'll use some anti-seize on the mating surface of our bearing hub. Clean the back side of the rotor. We'll temporarily install it with an axle nut and one of our original lug nuts, just holding this in place. Now it's time to reinstall the brake caliper. When installing the brake caliper, we've cleaned our threads and applied some blue thread locker. Slide the caliper right on over that rotor, start on the mounting bolts and snug them up. They're started in, snug them, torque those to 111 foot-pounds. Now we can remove our lug nut and our spacer. We'll set these aside. Now it's time to resecure the axle to the hub here. Get the nut on. When installing the nut, you'll find that it only turns so far before it starts turning this entire thing. The easiest way to tighten this is to use a pry bar diagonally across the studs all the way down to the ground, preventing this from turning on you. When you go to tighten this nut, never use an impact gun, only use hand tools. The torque for this is 148 foot-pounds. Now it's time to install our front wheel. We'll get this in place. Start on all 5 of our 19mm lug nuts. Once we have them bottomed out, get the wheels safely back on the ground and torque each of them to 100 foot-pounds. With the wheels safely back on the ground, we'll be torquing these in a crisscross manner to 100 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay friend, we finished our front wheel bearing. At this point, you want to go ahead and pump up your brake pedal till it's firm, take your vehicle for a road test, make sure you hear no funny noises, and get yourself a 4-wheel alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.